Okay. We're working
And we will go now to Dan in North Brunswick, New Jersey. Dan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi. Thanks for waiting.
How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I just want to say I'm a real big fan of you guys. I think what you guys are doing is great.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Anyway, so I'm an atheist, and I had some Jehovah's Witnesses come to my house the other day. And
that's always entertaining, isn't it?
And I entertain them and let them talk to me about what they believed and stuff. And I'm studying chemistry, so my knowledge of thermodynamics and the Big Bang and physics is pretty good. So I used some of that to explain to them, to actually give them a crash course in physics on how the Big Bang works, because they obviously don't understand. You know what I mean?
Let me guess what happened. They all kind of said and ran away.
Yeah, well, they didn't. They haven't come back yet. I told them they can come back and talk to me whenever they wanted. You know what I mean? Because I like debating these things with people. I feel that
they're fishing for souls.
It helps my argument skills in this field, but it also lets them know that there aren't people who you can just come and talk to and think you can just persuade people to do whatever you want. That they're smart people that'll question what you think and argue with you on things like that. So some of the questions I had for you guys is the one thing that they asked me, which I couldn't really find a good answer to explain, which is what the purpose of life was. They said to me, well, what's the purpose of life? And I said, to reproduce and to live. That's in the laws of thermodynamics. The way they are, and they wanted to know why the purpose of those laws.
It's a loaded question. It's a loaded question because for there to be a grand purpose, there has to be somebody for whom that purpose is meaningful, right? And it's a loaded question where they're inferring that there's a God to whom the purpose matters.
It's like them starting out by asking who created the universe, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it a question with an assumption that's their assumption, right, from the get-go. What they need to do is show that there needs to be any purpose, Now, there's reasons why things are true. I can be walking down the street and see a rock in the side of the road, and I can wonder, what is the reason why that rock is there? And then we're talking about the history of all the forces that moved that rock around and shaped it to its current shape. That's not what they're talking about, right? They are trying to shoehorn in the assumption that there's somebody who would have a purpose.
And you may have your own purpose for your own life and your own reasons for doing things, and that's perfectly fine. And that fits in this notion of the purpose of the design or conscious decision making. But as Jeff says, they're just trying to shoehorn in a little spot for their God. So it's a tricky question. It's a subtle thing. And unless you know to look for it, you could easily get tripped up by that.
Okay, I understand what you mean. And another thing I wanted to ask you guys is, I was talking to them, and I told them, that I had read a couple of passages in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that actually preach genocide in the Old Testament, such as Deuteronomy and stuff like that. Now,
the flood.
I've heard that there are a lot of passages that preach this kind of stuff, and I'm just curious, is there really an overwhelming amount?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm just realizing I haven't hosted the show in years. I have a big notebook of useful tidbits of info that I've gathered, and one is a complete listing of all of the deaths in the Bible that were either committed, all the killings that were committed either by God directly or in response to his supposed command.
And you did a show on this. It's not just in your notebook. You did a show, and you can look in our archives for that show.
Is it up there somewhere?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. There's. It's in the multiple millions.
Okay.
Of course, you have to estimate a lot of it, but yeah.
That's pretty overwhelming.
That's in multiple millions, not even counting things like, and they destroyed this entire city and killed everyone in it without seeing fit to tell you how many people that was. It's still in the multiple millions. So...
Wow. That's pretty intense.
There's a lot of that in the Old
Testament.
Testament.
I said that, their faces totally went blank, and they had a King James Bible with them, but that's not the Old Testament. And I said,
King James has Old Testament in it.
Print some of the Old Testament scriptures up that said that from Deuteronomy, and they weren't really interested in having me do that.
Well, a lot of Christians aren't familiar with the Bible very very well, and they've been led down the rosy path of all the joy and wonder bread that's there, and they're not even aware of these passages. And often you can really surprise them by saying, "Hey, look at this, and here's God ordering this thing," and of course, then you get into rationalizations like, "Oh, well, they were wicked, or they deserved it, or they blah blah blah," and that's kind of a little rabbit hole.
Ultimately, when you corner them, they may well resort to, we believe that God made up the rules of right and wrong, so anything that he does is automatically right because he says so. Therefore, those killings don't count because they deserved it.
Well, can I ask you a question? Well, if God orders people to kill, and then he says, in his commandments that thou shalt not kill, isn't that kind of like telling people to do as I say and not as I do?
Absolutely.
It is, but also that's why they call him the divine lawgiver. If they called him a divine law follower, then you could catch him, right? Then you could say, no, he did this thing here and that thing there.
Yeah, there's
as
a lot
soon
of
as he's
escapes.
the guy who's the source of the rules, that makes him the guy who could break him at any time.
Right. He puts you in this world, he can take you out.
And if you corner a lot of Christians, they will fall back to that. That morality doesn't count when it's God doing the immoral thing.
But the
because
gist of
by
this
definition, anything he does is right.
But the gist of this is anybody that buys into this stuff has got their moral compass spinning in all sorts of different directions. Right? It's just so much clearer if you put this thing aside. And say, would I want to have someone kill me? No. Well, maybe I shouldn't kill them.
Right.
Do I want to live in a society where people are killing each other? Do I want to live in a society where people don't kill each other? It's pretty simple stuff, right?
Yeah, no, I understand completely. And my last thing I really wanted to ask you guys is next time is there a better approach I can take to next time they come here to like totally be able to fend off anything they say to me? I know you guys are very good at arguing with people, so is there anything I could...
It's not a question of approach, it's a question of knowing stuff.
Okay.
That's true.
Knowing stuff, and also, having a good bullshit detector.
Yeah.
Because just anything they tell you, recast it as fair an analogy as you can make in your head. Run your mind through that, and ask yourself, this thing they're telling me, this kind of assumption they're asking me to make, would that be reasonable and fair in any other circumstances? And if the answer is no, you've got them, and you tell them so.
Okay.
That's what I do.
Well, let me throw out another thing too. If you're interested in Jehovah's Witnesses in particular, you might go look at and study up on all the different predictions they've made that the end of the world is going to happen and that have been wrong. And you might make a little list of those and point those out, and then you can also look up. There's a passage in the Bible about preaching false religion and false doctrine, and you can kind of put those two together and
watch their little brains
ask them
explode.
whether they accept the punishment for preaching false religion. Anyway, so that would be one thing I'd maybe throw out for fun.
Okay, Dan.
But that'll pretty much guarantee they won't come back.
Thank you my call. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
You're welcome, Dan.
Have
Thanks
fun.
for calling.
Have fun.
Good luck to you, sir.
I should add that for people who have never debated with theists, it's hard. It's hard because the theists don't logical arguments are not generally accepted by theists. They're locked into this emotional thing, and it's very hard to convince a theist of anything that goes against what they believe and those doctrines. But it's a good exercise, I think, for people to for atheists to go through these arguments and learn these things and understand them, because it helps you critically think. And there are lots of good reasons. There's reasons why we do this sort of show. We're doing the show for the fence sitters. We're doing the show for people who haven't made up their mind.
Yeah.
We're educating people. And those are the sorts of people that we're really trying to reach, I think.
And those are also not the sorts of people who tend to come door to door.
Right.
So
right.
If there's ever been a case of a door-to-door religion salesman getting disabused of their religion by some atheist whose door they come to, right, and going away a non-believer. If that's ever happened, I'd sure love to hear of it.
Oh, that'd be a great story.
As far as I have never heard of such a thing. I suppose it's remotely possible.
And it's not because we aren't right, it's just because it takes a long time, I think, to unlearn all this baggage and get rid of all this baggage. And it's not an epiphany sort of thing at all.
But one word of caution. I've heard a lot from believers about encounters they've had with non-believers who did not know their stuff, who did not argue well, who passed on hearsay that could easily be disproved, right? Who did a bad job, who resulted in that believer going away more certain that they were right.
Yep.
So be careful.